Commander Deho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Sole Defender, watching the stars through the massive viewport. His hands were steady as he held his morning coffee, but something felt wrong. The communication officer, Lieutenant Unesio, suddenly looked up from her console with wide eyes. "Commander, incoming priority transmission from Galactic Command," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Deho set down his cup and walked over, put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Admiral Zankari, a tall, blue-skinned alien with multiple eyes. His expression was cold and official. "Commander Deho, by order of the Galactic Council, you are hereby relieved of all military duties, effective immediately. All human personnel under your command are to stand down and await reassignment." "What?" Deho's face went pale. "Admiral, what's the meaning of this?" "We just saved 3 colonies last month. Our mission record is spotless. The decision has been made. Report to Station Alpha 7 for debriefing, that is all." The transmission ended abruptly. Meanwhile, millions of miles away on the massive space station that served as the Galactic Council headquarters, the great chamber was filled with the sound of alien voices. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in floating seats arranged in a perfect circle. At the center, Ambassador Minsu stood alone, his dark suit making him look small among the colorful alien delegates. "Admiral." Crystal of the Vorlani Empire rose from his seat. He was massive, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished metal. His voice boomed across the chamber as he pointed at Minsu. "Look at this human, fellow council members. They think they're warriors, but they're nothing more than primitive warmongers who got lucky a few times." Laughter erupted from various sections of the chamber. The Kaleri delegates, with their bird-like features, squawked in amusement. The crystal-based Nathrani species created harmonic sounds that resembled cruel giggling. Minsu stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Admiral Crystal, humanity has served this alliance faithfully for 5 years. We've saved countless lives and defended worlds that your own forces couldn't protect." "Defended." Crystal's metal face twisted into what might have been a grin. "You mean destroyed?" "Every world you humans save ends up looking like a battlefield. You're too violent, too unpredictable. Frankly, we're all tired of cleaning up your messes." More laughter filled the chamber. Senator Valthera of the Mystic Order floated forward on her energy platform. "The human approach to warfare is ... disturbing. They fight with such intensity, such brutality, makes even our enemies uncomfortable. That's exactly why we win." Minsu replied, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "When your peaceful negotiations fail, when your advanced technology isn't enough, you call us, and we deliver results. Results that come at too high a cost," declared High Counselor Zeke Sonder, the chamber's leader. His snake-like body coiled around his floating throne as he spoke. "Galactic Council has voted. From this moment forward, humans are banned from all military operations. You will serve in support roles only: logistics, maintenance, medical aid. No combat positions." The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Alien delegates high-fived with whatever appendages they had. Some species created light shows to celebrate. The Vorlani delegation began a traditional war chant, as if they had just won a great victory. Minsu stood in the center of it all, watching the celebration with growing anger. When the noise finally died down, he spoke in a voice that carried across the entire chamber. "You're making the biggest mistake in galactic history." The words hung in the air like a threat. Several delegates stopped cheering and looked at him with surprise. Crystal laughed loudest of all. "Oh, really? And what's a bunch of defanged humans going to do about it? Throw rocks at us?" "You'll find out," Minsu said quietly. "When the real threat comes, when something appears that your treaties can't stop and your technology can't handle, you'll remember this day. You'll remember when you threw away your best weapon because you were afraid of it. Threats now, human." Zixander. Eyes glowed red with anger. "Perhaps we should consider banning your species from the council entirely." "It's not a threat," Minsu replied, straightening his tie. "It's a promise. When that day comes, don't come crying to us for help." The alien delegates burst into fresh laughter. Some threw small objects at Minsu, Nothing harmful, just expressions of contempt. The human ambassador walked out of the chamber with dignity. But inside, he felt a cold dread as the celebration continued in the council chamber. Deep in the station's sensor array, something went unnoticed. Long range. Detection systems had picked up massive energy signatures approaching from the dark space between galaxies. The readings were unlike anything in their databases. Millions of ships moving in perfect formation, heading straight for their sector. But the technicians monitoring the sensors were too busy watching the council proceedings. On their screens, laughing along with their supervisors about the tamed humans, the warning signals blinked red in empty rooms. Ignored and unheard. In his private quarters, Minsu packed his belongings slowly. Through his window, he could see human ships being recalled from patrol duties, their crews confused and angry. His communication device buzzed with messages from human commanders asking what was happening. He didn't have good answers for them. All he knew was that the galaxy had just made itself much less safe, and none of them realized it yet. 3 weeks after the Galactic Council's decision, Captain Jinwoo found himself standing in Supply Bay 7 of the merchant vessel Star Trader. Counting boxes of medical supplies, his once pristine military uniform had been replaced with a plain gray jumpsuit that marked him as support staff. The man who had once commanded 3 battle cruisers and planned tactical strikes that saved entire worlds now spent his days making sure cargo containers were properly labeled. "Hey, human," called out Sergeant Vexkari, a lizard-like Saurian, who walked over with 2 of his squad mates. "Make sure you count those bandages twice. You know how bad humans are with numbers?" Jinwoo kept his eyes focused on his tablet, marking inventory items. "They're counted correctly, Sergeant." "Oh, it speaks." Skari laughed, turning to his friends. "I heard this one used to be some kind of big shot, a captain or something. Look at him, perfect job for his species. Humans are good at carrying things around." The other aliens joined in the laughter. One of them, a tall, insectoid creature, clicked his mandibles together in amusement. "My cousin serves on the Nexus Prime station. He says all the humans there are like broken toys now. They just do whatever they're told and keep quiet." Ginwoo's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had been given strict orders from Ambassador Minsu himself. Endure the mockery, don't fight back, and wait. But it was getting harder every day. On the other side of the galaxy, the Kalari Broadcasting Network was having its most successful month in years. Their latest entertainment program, Tamed Beasts, featured comedy sketches about humans in their new roles. The show's host, a bright orange bird-like creature named Crixila, stood on stage in front of a live alien audience. "So a human walks into a medical bay," she squawked, her voice amplified across millions of screens throughout the galaxy. The doctor says, "What's wrong?" The human says, "I used to be a warrior, but now I'm a janitor." The doctor says, "Well, at least now you're cleaning up messes instead of making them." The audience erupted in laughter and applause. The joke was broadcast to hundreds of worlds, where aliens watched and shared it with their friends. Soon, similar jokes were spreading through social networks, each one more cruel than the last. On the military station Nexus Prime, things were even worse. Lieutenant Taman sat in the station's cafeteria, eating his lunch alone. Around him, alien soldiers from various species talked loudly about their day. "I had to work with a human today," announced a blue-skinned Centaurian officer. "Slowest creature I've ever seen. I asked him to move some equipment, and he actually asked me questions about it." Questions. As if a human needs to understand anything beyond pickup, Carrie put down. "What was his name?" asked his companion, a tall gray alien with multiple arms. "Something ridiculous, Taman, I think. These human names all sound like baby talk anyway." The gray alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Taman. Sounds like something you'd name a pet here, Taman. Sit, Taman. Good boy." The entire table burst into laughter. Taman's hands gripped his fork so tightly that his knuckles turned white, but he forced himself to keep eating. He had been a decorated pilot just a month ago, flying dangerous reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines. Now he was assigned to cleaning the station's waste recycling systems at another table. A group of young alien recruits were playing a new game that had become popular throughout the military. They would take human names and use them as punchlines. For jokes. "Why did Soyoung cross the space dock?" one of them asked. "I don't know why," replied another. "Because someone told her to." They all laughed, like it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Soyoung herself was working just 2 levels below them, carrying environmental systems. She could hear the laughter echoing through the ventilation shafts. Once, she had been a systems engineer who designed the defensive shields for entire battle fleets. Now, she fixed air recyclers and water purifiers. While aliens made jokes about her name, General Hai-Jin stood in what used to be her command center, watching as the last of her equipment was removed. Her elite special operations unit, the Ghost Squadron, had been the most feared human military force in the galaxy. They had completed 127 missions without a single failure, rescuing hostages from impossible situations and striking enemy targets that other forces couldn't touch. Now her soldiers were scattered across the galaxy, assigned to mundane jobs. Some worked in kitchens, others in maintenance crews. A few of the lucky ones got positions as medical assistants or communications operators. But none of them were allowed to carry weapons or participate in any military planning, ma'am said. Colonel Park, her former second-in-command, as he approached with a datapad. "I've got the final reassignment orders. Most of our people are being sent to civilian transport ships or supply stations." Hajin took the pad and scrolled through the names. Each one represented a highly trained warrior who had dedicated their life to protecting the galaxy. Now they were being treated like servants. "What about the training facilities?" she asked. "Shut down?" "All human combat training is now prohibited. They're converting our simulators into entertainment centers for alien personnel." Hai-Jin closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "And our weapons? Confiscated? Even the ceremonial swords from our honor ceremonies?" Through the massive windows of the command center, Hai-Jin could see human ships being escorted away from the station by alien security forces. Each departure felt like watching a friend move away forever. The most painful part wasn't the loss of rank or the menial jobs. It was the way the galaxy seemed to have forgotten what humans were capable of. In just 3 weeks, 5 years of human military achievements had been erased from public memory. The species that had once whispered human names with respect now used those same names as comedy material. But perhaps most troubling of all was how quickly some humans were beginning to accept their new reality. Hai-Jin had received reports of human personnel who had stopped training entirely, who seemed relieved to be out of combat situations. The warrior spirit that had made humanity feared was slowly being crushed under the weight of constant humiliation. As she packed up her personal belongings, Hai-Jin wondered if this was how it would end, not with a great battle, but with humanity simply forgetting how to fight back. The first sign of trouble came from the Outer Rim colony of New Cygnus. Communications Officer Jeltar was enjoying his morning shift at the Galactic Communication Hub when his screen suddenly went dark. Tried to re-establish contact with the colony, but there was nothing, not even static. It's probably just a solar storm, he muttered to himself, making a note to check on it later. New Cygnus was a small farming colony with barely 10,000 inhabitants. Equipment failures happened all the time in the outer territories, but 12 hours later, when the scheduled supply ship arrived at New Cygnus, Captain Velinari found something that made his blood run cold. The entire planet was covered in a strange, pulsing, organic material. The cities were gone, the farms were gone, even the mountains looked different. Most terrifying of all, there were no life signs anywhere on the planet. "Command, this is supply." "Vessel Merchant's Dream," Velinari radioed back to headquarters, his voice shaking. "New Cygnus is ... It's been consumed. I don't know how else to describe it. The entire planet looks like it's been digested." Before anyone could respond, Velinari's ship detected massive energy signatures approaching from deep space. The readings were unlike anything in the galactic database, organic technology mixed with mechanical systems, moving in perfect formation. Millions of ships, each one roughly the size of a city, were heading straight for the next colony system. "My God," Velinari whispered. "There are so many of them." The Krillian death swarm had arrived. Within hours, 3 more colonies went silent, then 5 more. Each time, the same pattern, total communication blackout, followed by reports from passing ships of planets covered in organic material. The invaders moved with purpose and speed that terrified even the most experienced military commanders. Admiral Crixtel, who had mocked humans just months earlier, now found himself in the war room of the Galactic Defense Force headquarters. The massive holographic display showed the invasion pattern with red dots marking each lost colony. "How many ships are we talking about?" he demanded from the intelligence officer. Conservative estimates put the fleet at over 2 million vessels. "Admiral, they're moving in coordinated groups, hitting multiple targets simultaneously." Crixtel's metal face showed no emotion, but inside he felt a growing dread. "What do we know about their technology?" "It's biomechanical, sir. Living ships that can adapt and evolve. Our sensors are having trouble getting detailed readings because the ships seem to change their configurations constantly, and their objectives? Unknown, sir. They don't respond to any communication attempts. They just ... consume everything." The first major battle came at Kepler Station, a massive military outpost that guarded the entrance to the core worlds. The station commander, General Lexvani, had assembled the largest defense fleet in galactic history. Over 300 ships from various species, all equipped with the most advanced weapons technology available. Among the support staff was Captain Yanho, a former human tactical officer who had been reassigned to communications duty. As he watched the alien commanders plan their defense strategy, he felt a growing sense of unease. "General," he said, stepping forward, "I've been studying the attack patterns from the outer colonies. I think we're making a mistake." General Dexvani, a tall reptilian creature with scales that changed color based on his mood, looked at Yanho with obvious annoyance. "Captain, you're here to operate communications equipment, not provide tactical advice." "Sir, with respect, these enemies are adapting to every defense they encounter. The traditional formation you're planning won't work. We need to think differently." "These creatures are obviously primitive," Dexvani replied, his scales shifting to an angry red color. "They may have numbers, but they lack the sophisticated military thinking that civilized species possess. We'll crush them with superior strategy and technology." Yanho tried to argue, but the general dismissed him with a wave of his clawed hand. The human captain was forced to watch as the alien commanders implemented a textbook. Defensive formation, ships arranged in neat lines, weapon systems coordinated for maximum firepower, shields configured for standard energy attacks. When the Krillian forces arrived, the battle lasted exactly 37 minutes. The biomechanical ships moved like living creatures, flowing around the defensive formations like water around rocks. They seemed to anticipate every move the Galactic Defense Force made, adapting their tactics in real time. When the aliens concentrated their firepower on one group of Krillian ships, the creatures would split apart into smaller units that were harder to target. When the defenders tried to spread out, the Krillians would suddenly converge in overwhelming numbers. But the most terrifying aspect was how the enemy ships seemed to learn from each attack. The first wave of Krillian vessels was destroyed by conventional weapons. But the second wave had adapted. Their hulls absorbed the energy weapons that had been effective minutes earlier. The third wave was completely immune to the defenders' primary weapons systems. "They're learning," Yanho whispered into his headset. "They're adapting faster than we can adjust our tactics." General Vexvani ignored him, shouting orders to his fleet commanders. "Increase power to forward shields. Concentrate all firepower on the largest enemy vessels." As the Galactic Defense Force ships focused their weapons on the larger targets, smaller Krillian vessels swarmed around them like insects. The biomechanical ships latched onto the hulls of the alien vessels and began secreting some kind of acid that ate through the strongest armor like paper. Hull breach on Deck 7. Someone screamed over the communications system. "The acid is spreading throughout the ship." Within minutes, dozens of Galactic Defense Force vessels were dissolving from the inside out. The screams of dying crew members filled the communication channels as ship after ship fell to the Krillian assault. Admiral Crystal's flagship, Vorlani Pride, was the most powerful vessel in the fleet. Its shields could withstand the direct impact of a small moon, and its weapon systems were designed to destroy entire cities. But when the Krillians focused their attention on it, even this mighty vessel was helpless. The biomechanical ships surrounded the Pride like a school of predatory fish. They attacked in waves, with each wave using different tactics than the last. First came energy weapons that the ship's shields handled easily. Then came physical projectiles that the armor deflected. But the third wave released clouds of microscopic organisms that somehow passed through both shields and armor to attack the ship's systems directly. Engineering reports that our power systems are being consumed from the inside, reported the Pride's first officer. The biological agents are eating our technology. Crystal watched in horror as his ship's lights began to dim. The mighty vessel that had terrorized enemies across the galaxy was being devoured by creatures the size of bacteria. Abandon ship, he ordered, but it was too late.
Ow.
The Krillian organisms had already consumed the escape pod launch systems. The last transmission from the Vorlani Pride was Admiral Crystal's voice. Filled with terror, they're not just destroying us, they're studying us, learning from us. Every ship they destroy makes them stronger. Dear gods, what have we awakened? In the span of 1 hour, the most powerful military force in the galaxy was reduced to scattered survivors fleeing in damaged ships. 50,000 soldiers were dead, and hundreds of vessels were either destroyed or consumed. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the realization that the Krillians had been holding back, using the battle as a learning experience rather than trying to achieve total victory. The nightmare had only just begun. Re-tried it. The emergency klaxons blared throughout the Galactic Council. Headquarters as representatives from across the galaxy rushed into the Great Chamber. For the first time in its 100-year history, the Council was meeting in full crisis mode. The floating seats that once held proud delegates now carried beings who looked pale, terrified, and desperate. High Counselor Zixander Serpentine. Form was coiled tightly around his throne, his scales a sickly yellow color that indicated extreme stress. His voice, once commanding and authoritative, now carried a tremor of fear. Fellow council members, we face an unprecedented threat. In just 2 weeks, the Krillian forces have consumed 47 colonies and destroyed 3 major military installations. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Representatives were shouting over each other, demanding answers, solutions, anything that might save their worlds. Senator Valthara of the Mystic Order floated forward on her energy platform, her usually calm demeanor completely shattered. The Krillian bioships are now less than 3 days from the Mystic homeworld, she announced, her voice breaking. Our most powerful meditation masters attempted to communicate with them telepathically. The masters, they're now in catatonic states. Whatever intelligence controls these creatures, it's beyond our understanding. In the back of the chamber, Ambassador Minsu sat in silence, watching the chaos unfold around him. The same aliens, who had mocked humanity's military capabilities just months ago, were now crying for help. He noticed how they carefully avoided looking in his direction, their pride preventing them from admitting their mistake even as their civilizations crumbled. Meanwhile, deep in the Council Station's communication center, General Sujin was working the night shift. Her once prestigious rank meant nothing now. She was just another communications officer, monitoring transmissions from across the galaxy. But this mundane job had given her a front-row seat to the galaxy's collapse. Mayday. Mayday. This is the transport ship. Gentle breeze crackled through her headset. We're carrying evacuees from Delian Prime. Krillian bioships have surrounded us. They're not attacking, they're studying us. Oh God, they're learning our language from our communications. They're speaking to us now. They want to know about our propulsion systems. Sujin's blood ran cold. The Krillians weren't just destroying, they were learning. Every encounter made them smarter, more dangerous. She quickly recorded the transmission and flagged it as priority intelligence. But she knew it would likely be ignored. Like all the other warnings from human personnel, another transmission came through. This one from a Kolari military commander. Central Command, this is General Crixilla. The Krillians have adapted to our plasma weaponry. Pete, plasma weapons are now ineffective. They're using our own energy against us. Request immediate reinforcement with kinetic weapons. Knew there would be no reinforcements. The Kaleri homeworld was already under siege. She had intercepted the evacuation orders 12 hours ago, though the public hadn't been told yet. The same species that had created comedy shows, mocking humans, was now fleeing their own planet. The most heartbreaking transmissions came from the Vorlani Empire. Once the most arrogant and militaristic species in the galaxy, they were now facing complete annihilation. Sujin listened as their capital city's emergency broadcast system repeated the same message over and over. All citizens of Vorlani Prime. This is Emperor Zorthok. The Krillian bioships will reach our atmosphere in 18 hours. Mandatory evacuation is now in effect. Take only essential belongings. Military personnel will provide escort to the evacuation ships. This is not a drill. The Empire... The Empire is ending. The Emperor's voice broke at the end, a sound that Sujin had never expected to hear from the proud Vorlani leader. She remembered how Vorlani soldiers had laughed at human military tactics, calling them primitive and unnecessarily brutal. Now, their entire civilization was fleeing in terror. Back in the council chamber, the emergency session had been going on for hours with no progress. The military commanders who had once dismissed human warnings were now desperately proposing one. Failed strategy after another. We could use gravitational weapons, suggested Admiral Vexenary, a spider-like creature whose web ships had been completely destroyed in the first week of the invasion. Create artificial black holes to trap their fleets. The Krillians adapted. 2 gravitational attacks after the Battle of Zarian, replied General Mordith, a crystalline being whose homeworld had been consumed 3 days ago. They now use gravitational forces to accelerate their movements. Your weapons would only make them faster. What about biological warfare? Asked Senator Yilgirth. We could create a virus that targets their organic components. Tried and failed, came the response from Dr. Vexelara, the galaxy's leading biological weapons expert. The Krillian bioships absorbed our virus and incorporated it into their own systems. They now use enhanced versions of our own bioweapons. Against us. The debate continued for hours, but every suggestion was met with reports of how the Krillians had already adapted to that particular strategy. The enemy seemed to be always one step ahead, learning from every encounter and turning. The galaxy's own weapons against them, Ambassador Minsu watched as the pride of the galactic community slowly crumbled. He noticed how they still wouldn't make eye contact with him, even as their worlds burned. Their arrogance had become a prison that prevented them from seeing the obvious solution right in front of them. Perhaps, he said quietly, speaking for the first time in hours, you should consider unconventional tactics. The chamber fell silent. High Counselor Zixander's serpentine head turned toward him, scales shifting to an angry red. Human, you are here as an observer only. We did not ask for your input. No, Minsu replied calmly. You didn't ask. You never ask. Even when your conventional wisdom is getting everyone killed, how dare you? Shouted Admiral Crixanth, one of the few surviving Vorlani commanders. You humans know nothing about real warfare. You're barbarians who've got lucky a few times. Lucky? Minsu stood up slowly, his voice carrying across the chamber. Your people called us lucky when we saved the Centauri colonies. Lucky when we stopped the Zephyrian rebellion. Lucky when we rescued your own people from the Dark Star pirates. But it wasn't luck, was it? You just couldn't admit that sometimes. Barbarism works better than civilization. The chamber erupted in angry voices, but Minsu continued speaking. You want to know why the Krillians are winning? Because they think like predators? They adapt, they learn, they use every advantage they can find. They're not following your polite rules of warfare. They're following the rules of survival. Enough. Zixander's voice boomed through the chamber. We will not be lectured by a species we have rightfully contained. The Krillians are simply more advanced than your primitive minds can comprehend. Minsu sat back down, but his words hung in the air like a challenge. Around the chamber, some of the younger delegates looked thoughtful, as if they were finally beginning to understand what he was saying. But the older, more established leaders remained stubbornly convinced that their way was the only way. As the session continued into the night, more reports came in. The Krillian forces were now advancing on multiple fronts, and their bioships were exhibiting new capabilities with each battle. They had learned to mimic allied ship signatures, to communicate in dozens of languages, to predict enemy movements with frightening accuracy. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every victory. And in the council chamber, the leaders who had caused this crisis through their arrogance continued to refuse the one solution that might save them all. Retry to Ditha. Council chamber had never felt so small. For 3 days straight, emergency sessions had produced nothing but despair and defeat. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed a terrifying sight. Red dots representing Krillian forces were now just 2 star systems away from the core worlds. Earth, Vorlani Prime, the Kaleri homeworld, and dozens of other major civilizations would fall within the week. High Counselor Zixander Scales had turned a pale gray, the color of death among his species. His voice was barely a whisper as he read the latest reports. The Krillians have consumed the entire outer defense grid, Admiral Telvanni's fleet. There were no survivors. The bioships are moving faster now, as if they're eager to reach the populated worlds. Senator Velfara floated at the edge of her energy platform, her mystical robes torn and dirty. She hadn't slept in days. My homeworld is 48 hours before the first bioships arrive. Our evacuation ships can't carry even half the population. Billions will die. The chamber was filled with the sound of quiet sobbing. Representatives who had once carried themselves with dignity and pride now sat hunched over in their seats, broken by the weight of impending extinction. Some species had already gone silent. Their representatives hadn't been heard from in days, suggesting their worlds had already fallen. Admiral Crixanth of the Vorlani Empire stood up slowly, his arms shaking with exhaustion and fear. Fellow council members, I propose we begin final surrender negotiations. Perhaps, if we offer the Krillians our technology, our knowledge, they might spare some of our populations as servants or livestock. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The greatest military alliance in galactic history was preparing to surrender without landing a single, meaningful blow against their enemy. That's when Ambassador Minsu stood up. Every head in the chamber turned toward him. For months, he had sat quietly in the back, watching as his warnings were ignored and his people were humiliated. Now, as the galaxy faced its darkest moment, the human ambassador walked slowly to the center of the chamber. Honored council members, he said, his voice calm and steady in contrast to the panic around him, I request permission to address this assembly. Zixander looked confused. Human, this is hardly the time for speeches. We're discussing surrender terms. I'm not here to give a speech, Minsu replied, pulling a small device from his pocket. I'm here to show you something that might change your perspective on surrender. He activated the device, and a holographic projector rose from the chamber floor. 3 years ago, before humanity joined the Galactic Federation, we had our own encounter with the Krillians. It's not in any of your databases because we never reported it. We handled it privately. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the sobbing stopped as delegates leaned forward to hear what the human was saying. The attack came at our colony on Jeju Prime, Minsu continued, his fingers working on the device controls. It was a farming settlement, mostly civilians. Teachers, mechanics, farmers, families. When the Krillian bioships arrived, there were 2,000 humans on the planet facing an invasion force of over 2 million Krillian organisms. Admiral Crixanth scoffed weakly. Impossible. No force that small could survive against the Krillians. Your colony must have been evacuated. Minsu smiled grimly. No evacuation. No military support. No advanced weapons. It's just ordinary humans. Doing what humans do when cornered. He pressed a button, and the holographic display came to life. The footage was grainy, clearly recorded by civilian cameras and security systems. It showed a peaceful farming colony with simple buildings and agricultural fields. Then, suddenly, The sky darkened as massive biomechanical ships descended from space. The council members watched as Krillian organisms poured from the ships like a living flood. The creatures were exactly the same as the ones currently devastating the galaxy, adaptive, intelligent, seemingly unstoppable. They moved in perfect coordination, overwhelming the colony's simple defenses within minutes. But then something strange happened. A man appeared on screen, middle-aged, wearing simple farmer's clothes, carrying nothing but a farming scythe. The nameplate at the bottom of the screen identified him as Dong Hain, a rice farmer and colony leader. "Listen up, everyone." Dong Hain's voice came through the speakers, calm, despite the chaos around him. "These things think they know us because they consumed a few outer settlements. They're wrong. It's time to show them what happens when you threaten human families." What followed defied everything the alien council members thought they knew about warfare. Dong Hain began organizing the civilians with terrifying efficiency. Children as young as 12 were given specific tasks, not fighting but information gathering. They used their small size to crawl through ventilation systems and report on Krillian movements. Elderly farmers became bomb makers, using fertilizer and household chemicals to create explosives that the Krillians couldn't adapt to because they weren't standard. Military weapons teacher Nari appeared next, coordinating groups of colonists, with hand signals and written messages to avoid Krillian interception of communications. She turned the colony's school into a command center, using classroom maps and children's toys to plan counterattacks that looked like games, but functioned as sophisticated military operations. The aliens in the council chamber watched in growing amazement as mechanic Junho demonstrated how to turn farming equipment into deadly weapons. A simple crop harvester became a mobile fortress. Irrigation pipes became projectile launchers. Even kitchen utensils were modified into tools of war. But the most disturbing part for the alien observers was the psychological warfare. Species that had been preparing for extinction suddenly found themselves with hope. The unstoppable Krillians could be stopped, but only by the humans they had foolishly banned from military service. More human fleets were deployed, each one employing tactics that seemed impossible to the alien observers. They used asteroid fields as camouflage, turned space debris into weapons, and employed psychological warfare techniques that drove Krillian bioships to attack empty space in confusion and panic. But perhaps most terrifying of all, from the alien perspective, was watching humans coordinate with species they had never worked with before. Human commanders quickly learned to incorporate alien technologies and capabilities into their battle plans, creating hybrid tactics that were even more effective than pure human strategies. The tide of war turned so quickly that it left the galaxy's leaders stunned. Systems that had been written off as lost were suddenly reporting Krillian retreats. Bioships that had seemed unstoppable were being destroyed or captured. Most importantly, the Krillians were showing something they had never displayed before: fear. 3 weeks after their reinstatement, human forces had not only stopped the Krillian advance, but had begun pushing them back toward the galactic rim. The creatures that had consumed dozens of worlds were now fleeing in disorganized panic, their perfect coordination shattered by human unpredictability. In the council chamber, same beings who had mocked human capabilities now competed to offer them honors, rewards, and positions of authority. Former critics lined up to request human protection for their worlds. Ambassador. Minsu watched the transformation with satisfaction but no surprise. As the emergency session ended and representatives hurried away to coordinate with human commanders, he spoke quietly to the empty chamber. "We tried to warn you. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our numbers. It's that we never stop adapting, never stop fighting, and never forget who underestimated us." Outside the station windows, human warships could be seen, escorting grateful alien vessels to safety, their crews working tirelessly to protect the civilizations that had rejected them. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about the price of pride and the value of the warriors they had tried to tame. The Krillians were still out there, somewhere in the dark between galaxies, but now they knew the truth, that the galaxy's leaders had forgotten. There are some species you should never try to cage. and humans are at the top of that list. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.